Hello, my name is Alex from the Advent Label Applicator Company. This is going to be a demonstration of an Advent 300. The Advent 300 is a pressure-sensitive labeler, semi-automatic labeler, and we received some samples here. We haven't received, some of the labels are a little bit mismatched for the containers that were sent, but we'll go ahead and go through the video and just show you how it works with this one container, this 3-ounce glass container, which actually ended up being the most difficult of all the containers. Everything else should be fairly straightforward. Let me go ahead and demonstrate the machine really quickly. Essentially how it works is we would just insert the container and then the label simply goes on. And generally it looks fantastic. We could adjust the position, like right now it's a little bit on the low side. So if I wanted to adjust that, like everything on the Advent 300, it's just a simple movement of the product guides. So in this case, I'm just going to move that container down a little bit. We'll insert, and we'll go ahead and you'll see that single label goes on. And we kind of moved it up, we spaced it a little bit, just about a 1/16 of an inch. But as you can see here, this label does a really good job of dealing with this glass container, but this glass is actually has a lot of flat spots and divots. It's not perfectly concentric. And with a thick label like this and fairly stiff, it doesn't have a lot of stretch to it, you'll get these trapped air pockets in here. As you can see, it looks fairly good, but then we hit this problematic area on the glass, and then you can see it will possibly wrinkle. And generally, what we do on a 300 is we have an overhead pressure arm that puts weight on the container. And sometimes we've added a spring here. However, this glass is really kind of a difficult glass. The quality could change from container to container quite a bit. So what we've actually done is we've added a little bit lever to create like an encapsulating motion here. So how it would work, and it's completely optional, but on this particular glass container, you would hold it. And what we did here is I peeled off some labels right here, so we just got to get it set up here. Okay, so we got that first label. We'll pull it out, and now it's been reset. So again, the idea is you insert and pull down the lever. And what that does is that helps encapsulate the label onto that glass surface. So it'll work the label into any of those flat spots or divots. And you can see here, even just feeling it, I could feel that there isn't any trapped air. And it looks absolutely perfect. And that's a really... it's just going to have something to deal with this particular glass container, this 3-ounce glass container. It's just something that you might have to do, unless you can get the quality of the glass a little bit better. But you can certainly feel it when you run your fingers across it, that there's just a lot of contours to this glass. So let me just go ahead and show you. The machine comes on this stand here with casters. And I'm just going to go through here. Even though you do have the additional step of holding down that lever, it really doesn't slow you down because you're just doing it within the labeling cycle. So as the operator gets used to the motion, you should do fairly well. And I think your other containers is something that you really don't have to worry about. Here's our final one. So I think that was like 10 containers. And if you were focused on it, you could probably average about 24 containers a minute. Let me go grab the second one, just randomly. And you can see, really great. It takes out any of the possible trapped air, and it looks absolutely perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and do a changeover. I'm going to keep this label size. You gave us these labels too, but they're essentially the same size. And it's designated as 3.1 ounces. So I don't think there's really any reason to switch over to these labels to run these plastic containers. I think generally these would be about 6 or 8 ounce, but we didn't receive those labels. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through the setup. Okay, as you can see here, the labels, you have about almost 8 inches to work with. But the rule of thumb is to put the labels in the center line of the machine. And then we could go ahead and open the carriage assembly here, and we would readjust the overhead pressure arm. I'll go ahead and do the label feeding on this smaller label for the smaller container. But I did forget my Allen wrench tool, so I'm going to take a stop here and then I'll... Okay, so I have my Allen wrench tool, and it comes with the machine. And what we're going to go ahead and do is just attach this carriage knob. This comes off to allow you to take off this aluminum cover. And we use a cast aluminum cover, which has a removable shoulder. So if you have a very tall container, like a 1-gallon bleach container, you could certainly accommodate that. So once that's attached, what I could do is I could adjust for different diameters. And a 300 could pretty much adjust from 1 inch to about 10 inches in diameter. And the rule of thumb is that we want the container supported by both sets of white rollers and just hovering over this peel bar. This peel bar is where the label is separated from the backing material. So we have that pretty much set up. And then I'm going to block my guides in. You always want a little bit of wiggle room. And then when you change the carriage for the different diameters, you do have to adjust your overhead pressure arm here. And the overhead pressure arm is designed to be moved left or right. And it can accommodate different diameters, obviously. So I'm just going to move it into the center line of the label. And then we have this little stop here. And you just put a little bit of space, about 1/8 of an inch. And once you do that, that means that you can put the container in without having to lift it up each and every time. And we're pretty much ready to go, but I do want to point out one thing. On the Advent 300 or any of the Advent machines, we have rollers that are fully adjustable. You can see we have some of them moved off to the side. As you can see here, we're really close to that ridge. And you can see we have it cleared on the rear. The rule of thumb is just to match it to the width of the label. But ideally, you would move that white tire out of the way. And let me go ahead and just demonstrate that so you can see how it works. On the ones in the back, we have a set screw. So as you can see here, we would just simply loosen the set screw and move these rear tires left or right. On these front tires, what we do is we actually use the Allen wrench tool just to slide them over. And then we can separate them out. Take them on, and that's pretty much ready to go. So as you can see here, we have a lot more clearance, and it's still supported. And that is pretty much the adjustment for doing a changeover to this container. So we go ahead, let me take this out. Simply insert. You can see that label just goes on quite nicely. And of course this plastic container is a lot more concentric. So you can see you don't have to really have the standard overhead pressure arm with the standard pressure. It works absolutely fine. And you can see you don't see any air pockets trapped or anything like that. So it looks absolutely fantastic. So these came into us already pre-labeled. We actually spent a lot of time peeling these labels off. But what I did is I just took 10, we have 10 or 9 right here. And we'll just go ahead and label them so you can get an idea of the speed. We do have an adjustable delay on the machine. What I usually do is we have it set around a little bit over half a second before it feeds the label on. You can certainly turn that down if you want to go faster, but I always like, because if you're a little bit off, like let's say I put it in incorrectly, it gives the container a moment or two to settle, so you don't have to be perfect. And generally it's about, I like to use 2 hands. And you just bring it up to the rollers and it will kind of take it out of your hand. And then you just take it out. And you can see there. Labeled these containers. Absolutely perfect. So really, really straightforward. The only thing you have to really adjust for is the overhead pressure arm, moving the carriage, and then adjusting your guides, and that's pretty much it. Oh, and moving your rollers if you have to accommodate these ridges. Okay, so now we're going to do a changeover. So let me get a little bit of room here. The machine has a built-in rewind, so you can see here the waste material is pulled up automatically. We have a nice mechanical clutch that keeps tension on that, and that's fully adjustable. If you're doing a mid-roll change, I like to pull out some of the leading material just so you don't have to waste any labels when you rethread it. Come back to that roll. Goes back into place just like a roll of toilet paper, spring-loaded, and only goes in one direction. And then to pull up your roll, just disconnect this brake arm spring. And that allows this arm to move freely and takes off the brake. And you can see here, we can just pull it out. And the spring loaded here, or it flexes these wings. And then we could have these guides, just simple thumb locks. And then you could use the other one to help pull that off, just like that. So we didn't get labels for those small containers, so I found something that I think will look nice on that glass container. It seems appropriate. And you can see here, when you put your roll of labels on here, you want it to be on there nice and snug. Especially with narrow labels, you want to make sure it bites into one of these clips. And when it bites into that clip, you can see it's not going to move. And that's very, very important, because if the roll of labels moves independent of this aluminum mandrel, it's going to prevent this braking arm from working correctly. And that's when you might get more than one label on the container. You can see it's putting those guides back into place. We put the side with the white strap on first. We flex that out. And you can just see it will drop into place. Alright, so we go underneath the brake arm. Goes forward underneath this idler with these white webbing guides. Those are fully adjustable, so you can accommodate different widths. The peel bar simply pops out. And then you just put the labels over it, and you want the sharp edge facing up and towards the white tires. We have these notches. It just falls into place. You can see it's nice and even. This is when you need to pull off probably about 16 to 18 inches of material or labels. Do one more. Okay. And then you'll see below, let me move that out of the way. You'll see those two black rollers, matte black rollers, a 4-inch drive roller and the 8-inch pinch roller. And that's what does all the work as far as feeding the label. You can see there's a little bit of drag there, but when I press on the switch, those two rollers come together and it feeds it through the machine. You can see it automatically deflects towards the back, so you don't have to do any fishing for the label. Compared to a lot of other labeling machines out on the market, this one's very, very easy to thread. And then you just want to center things up as best you can. Reattach the brake arm spring. If you get more than one label, that's generally why, because the brake arm spring's not attached. And then you want to feed out a couple labels, because that's what allows the machine to get the labels centered. And you can see the machine's feeding out quite a bit of the label, almost all of it, with one trigger. And we have an adjustable pre-feed timer on the front of the machine. You can see at 0, won't feed out a label, even though you can hear the solenoid clicking. So what you're looking for is a number that feeds about anywhere from 25 to 50% of the label. You just want enough of it to be flagged so that the spinning motion will grab that leading edge and then pull it onto the container. So I think I'm right between 2 and 3. And that looks pretty good. About 50% of the label right there. And you always want to make sure that's consistent. Looks good to me. You can also feel it when you pull it out by hand. You can feel some back pressure. And that is what you're looking for, because you want that label to be kind of wrapped around the circumference of the container. Alright, so we have our container right here. You can see obviously it's too far away. So I'm going to move that carriage in. And you can see it's supported by both sets of rollers and just hovering over the peel bar. And because it's glass, I could just look at through the material or through the glass just to see where to position it. I'm moving my guides over. And then we have an overhead pressure arm that obviously we lost our gap. So now we have to readjust it. So it's fallen down, it's on the surface of the container. And then we just set a little bit of gap right there. And we could go ahead and start labeling right now. Now I will notice that this guide is very, very close to that white tire. And sometimes if you don't adjust that out, that guide could drop down and could be chewed up by, so what I always like to do is to move it. So I can just move my guide over. There's a set screw. Just slide it over. Make sure you tighten it up on the flat of the shaft. That's to prevent any burrs. And then you could drop that guide even lower and get closer to the shaft. It just gives you a little bit more room too. And that's pretty much it. This container doesn't have any ridges, so we don't. You can see if I turn that on, you can see it's spinning nice and smoothly, not lifting or being tilted left and right. And that's what you're looking for. As long as the container is rotating nice and true and not tilted in any way, that label should go on very, very accurately. And you can see that looks absolutely perfect. If I wanted to raise the label placement, I would simply just move the container down. So, I could use the same container. You can see. So we just moved it up slightly. And I think that's pretty much dead center. And again, really good adhesion. Looks fantastic. So let me go ahead and bring this part in, and we'll just go ahead and go through these. Now one of the neat things about the 300 is obviously we're not using an air system, so it's just 110 volts. And the other neat thing about our label application system, how those rollers work together to feed the label out, is you can use any type of label. You can use a clear label, a paper label, a film label. You can also use both die cut labels, which have a gap between the label, and then labels that don't have a gap between, because we're not using a photo eye. So you have a lot of flexibility as far as what type of labels you can use in the machine. You can see I'm just flying through these. There's a lot of flexibility in the Advent as far as adjustments. Obviously you can move the rollers left and right to accommodate ridges or chimes, but also the trigger can be moved. So if we wanted to trigger off away from the label, I don't think it makes a difference in this case, but you could certainly move the trigger over if you wanted to avoid that. 2 containers left. That's it. That's the Advent 300 labeling all these containers. I think close to about 20 right here. And they all look absolutely perfect. Great adhesion, no bubbles, no wrinkles. And any questions? Because we reached at 800-846-7716. Thank you.